Hello, I'm Dr. John Preston Parry. I am a board certified reproductive endocrinology and infertility specialist, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of the most core and important things for fertility, which is how can I get pregnant faster? What are the central things that matter? And what can you do about it to stack the deck more in your favor? So, if you want to know more about getting pregnant and increasing your odds, just continue watching. And if you have friends who should know, share this with them. So, how do you get pregnant? It seems a basic question, right? Because we've been doing it for millennia. Basically, people overcomplicate it. Got to have sperm, got to have egg. They've got to meet in the fallopian tube and then have a good place to attach in the uterus. And women often ovulate when an egg gets to be a particular size. So some people think, oh, you ovulate when you orgasm, something like that. No, the reason is the egg has to be a particular size in humans. And if it's not big enough, it's not ready for the sperm. And so you've got to get to a certain size. And that's why for many women, it's around day 14 of their cycle. And it can vary somewhere that. And then sperm have to be there, and the tubes have to be working, they have to meet, and then the embryo has to migrate back from the tube. And it does this or starts doing this around day 17 and around day 19 after the first full day of flow. That's when the embryo implants in the uterus. When should you have sex to get pregnant? I mean, everyone wants to know that. How do I time things? And people almost create this fertility fire drill, where the LH predictor kit becomes positive and everyone's saying, go, go, go. Doesn't work like that. If we had to be that deliberate, we would have died out as a species. So if you want to know when to get pregnant, here's the thing. Mid-cycle, when people ovulate, sperm typically live for 72 hours. So if you have sex Wednesdays, Saturdays, there's almost always there sperm for whenever an egg releases. So you don't have to be that deliberate about it. Or you could say the 11th, 14th, and 17th days of the cycle, with day one being the first day of full heavy flow for people with reliable and predictable cycles. But again, Wednesday, Saturday, keep it simple. And if you're having to do more than that, something may be wrong. If 75% of women are successfully pregnant in 3 months, and it hasn't happened in 6, 9, 12, you should have been pregnant 3 to 4 times. Maybe something's going on. That's where you should get things evaluated or look into it. Now, another thing people often ask is, how often should we have sex to improve the chances? I have couples coming into the office, both of them sore, barely able to walk from trying to maximize the DNA in the reproductive tract. And again, people are in the mood for that. I won't interfere, but it doesn't really change things. A guy named Wilcox did a New England Journal of Medicine article in 1995, and he looked at how many days in advance prior to ovulation people would have sex and how many times they had sex. And what they found is if you have sex, now 0 acts of sex the day of ovulation, if you're talking divine intervention every 2,000 years, it can happen, but it's not that common. But if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 times in the days leading up to ovulation, no difference in the pregnancy rate. So I tell people, have sex, again, 72 hours apart, do it for 2, 3 times around the window of ovulation, and that should cover you. Now, who does this not apply to? Now, again, this is general medical information. Anything I'm saying, coordinate with your doctor because people have exceptions, knowledge can evolve. But the people where the sperm don't live 72 hours, if there's a meaningful sperm factor, so there are problems with the sperm, if they've had cryotherapy or they've had chlamydia cervicitis, if something has been damaging to the cervix, sperm have a shorter half-life. They don't live as long. So you've got to know whether there's anything going on that would get in the way. Also, if you have other obstacles, if you have your tubes tied, it doesn't matter how often you have sex for things. Or you've had, again, pelvic inflammatory disease or ruptured appendicitis or advanced endometriosis closing off the tubes. So you want to know your tubes before you go too far on things especially if you're just trying the old-fashioned way and things are a bit slow. Another thing people really want to know about is, does sex and orgasm help with fertility? Now, obviously, for the guy, it matters a bit more. If the guy does not release the sperm into the reproductive tract, it's kind of hard to get pregnant. But for the woman, unfortunately, humans don't ovulate from orgasm. For Now, there are other species that do. Rabbits actually do, and they release all their eggs at the same time. For humans, doesn't work that way. So while we wish there were more incentives, from a reproductive standpoint to help out, uh, doesn't work that way for humans. Although, again, take care of each other and make sure that everyone's happy in the process, because it can be daunting. And if you aren't having fun along the way, that makes it even more difficult. Another thing that I'm often asked about is, does the position matter when trying to get pregnant? And people are saying you have to have particular angles, that if you have a retroflexed uterus, it has to be adjusted. It's not true. So, sperm reach the uterus within 2 minutes after ejaculation. They reach the tubes within 5 minutes and reach the peak concentration in about 10 minutes. And if sperm lived for 72 hours, you know what? You don't need to have the, the fact that it got there in 1 minute and 50 seconds instead of 2 minutes and it lives for 72 hours. It's not changing anything. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. One thing so many people want to know is, how valuable is an ovulation predictor kit? In other words, do I have to precisely know when I'm releasing an egg? And the reality is, the OPKs, or ovulation predictor kits, they're just telling you things are in the direction of moving forward. And there are fancy ones and they can get closer and closer, but you don't really need something like that to get pregnant. Again, we would have all died out if that had been necessary. Rather, it's just giving you a hint of when an egg will release. And the thing is, if sperm lives 72 hours and you just had relations, a day ago, then maybe 2 or 3 days later, you've covered that window, providing you don't have one of the reasons I listed for why sperm might not survive nearly as long. So you don't really need ovulation predictor kits. If it helps, nothing wrong with them. But many people, if they aren't getting pregnant quickly without them, often that means you've got to be suspicious. Is something else going on? But timing is very, very rarely the true reason for subfertility. Also, a question, and it really gets into a myth that a lot of people get wrong, is they're saying, I need lubricants in order to get pregnant with sex. And you know what? Not how it plays out. Actually, people say, oh, the lubricants can make things more slippery, get where they need to be. You know what? Most lubricants are spermicidal. They kill the sperm. So you can see a guy with, great counts, and within minutes, the sperm counts are declining as they've really been exposed to the spermicidal fluids. So you have to either get sperm-friendly lubricants or not to use them, but there are options. Some people advocate olive oil and canola oil, and there are studies showing that it actually has the same pregnancy rate as the commercial lubricants that are sperm-friendly. Some people can get infections with that, so I'd be pretty careful or mindful on that one. Many would advocate not using olive oil or canola oil for your own safety for things. How do you detect ovulation? Really important question. And some people have a thing called Mittelschmerz. It's this twinge that they get, and everyone thinks it's ovulation itself. You know what? The follicle or developing the fluid surrounding the egg doesn't contain battery acid. And so when you feel that twinge or that expansion, it's actually the expansion, not the release of an egg. When people feel that. And the German word is Mittelschmerz. The Germans seem to have a word for everything and make it incredibly long. But the bottom line for ovulation is, while you can do LH predictor kits and basal body temperature charting, which, remember, is after you ovulate by 3 days. In fact, that's when not only has fertilization occurred, but the embryo starts migrating back to the uterus from the tube. Everyone thinks fertilization occurs in the uterus. Nope. It occurs in the tube, and about day 3 after ovulation, that's when it heads back to the uterus to implant around day 5 or 6. But for detecting ovulation, honestly, most people don't need to detect it. Um, Again, if sperm lives 72 hours, have sex Wednesdays, Saturdays, and you're pretty much covered. For the timing of intercourse, charting menstrual cycles, back to what I was saying, I think it drives people crazy. In fact, basal body temperature charting, basically you're starting off with every single day getting up at the same time with a reminder that you are still not pregnant. I'm not a huge fan of that approach, especially since it's just retrospective and it just tells you, are your cycles regular or not? Well, you pretty much know if they are or not. There's some rare exceptions. And if you think you're one of those rare exceptions, talk to a specialist about it. But for the most part, if the cycles are regular, you're probably okay. Next thing that people wonder about is it okay to pee after sex if you're trying to get pregnant? So, first, again, if sperm are quickly reaching the uterus and tubes, it's not going to change anything. You're not going to pee out the sperm. It's a different location for the bladder and for the uterus. At the same time, there are some people who are predisposed to urinary tract infections, and in fact, some lubricants can make that even worse. If you happen to be one of those people, peeing before having relations and then after can sometimes reduce the risk of urinary tract infection. But again, if you are one of those people, you want to have coordinated with a doctor on what's best for you and your own balances so that you can minimize the risk for another infection. Anyway, that's a lot, short period of time. If you think there are other topics we should do, let us know. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and also visit positivestepsfertility.com to contact us directly. And again, don't suffer in silence. You're not alone. So many people are going through this, and support everyone who wants to have a family.